Some of the questions when a company contacts us to ask about a SOC 2 audit report is, what are the requirements? What do I need to do to prepare? How exactly are we going to be judged against the standard? And the way a SOC 2 audit report works is we will be looking at criteria. As part of the Trust Services principles, each principle has criteria that you must meet in order to demonstrate that you have placed this criteria into operation in order to meet the purpose of the principle that's being audited. And so I just want to give you an example of a criteria so that it can start to take shape and you can start to picture what an audit might look like in working with us during your SOC 2 engagement. In the security principle, which is also referred to as the common criteria for SOC 2 audit report, there's a criteria that states the entity has established workforce conduct standards, implemented workforce candidate background screening procedures, and conducts enforcement procedures to enable it to meet its commitments and requirements as they relate to the applicable trust services principles. And so when we look at that criteria, we're going to be asking you, what are your workforce conduct standards? For a lot of people, that will be contained within an employee handbook that governs the conduct standards that you have for your employees while they're in your employ. Do you have them acknowledge the handbook? Do you do training in order for them to understand what the standards are? Those are the types of things that we would look at in order to determine whether or not the criteria is in place. This piece of criteria also specifies background screening procedures. So we would expect to see a procedure on that written out, usually part of an employee handbook like that. And then we would want to see evidence that those background screening reports have been ordered and you're actually doing that for people. That's happened before where we go in order to see that criteria and someone says that they're doing background checks, but then they haven't done the background checks. And so we would need to see that that criteria has been met. And then the last piece of this example that I'm giving you is that you conduct enforcement procedures in order to enable your organization to meet its commitments. So in other words, if you have an employee handbook that governs workplace conduct, if you have a policy that you must perform background checks when people are hired, how do you enforce that? How do you make sure that people are actually following the rules? And so we would ask you how you monitor that in performance reviews if you address such standards. And we would also be looking at termination procedures. Do you communicate to your employees that violation of those standards or violation of certain background check requirements would result in some type of discipline up to and including termination? So just to give you an example there of criteria and how you would be able to demonstrate that you meet the criteria, that's the type of thing to prepare for in your SOC 2 audit report.